So this video is going to be talking about Fiora, her general playstyle, some tips with collecting her, and then also some cards that you want to be on the lookout for to maybe pick up now. That way when you pick up or start your Spiritforge deck, you have all you need. Let's first talk about Fiora's legend ability. Fiora's legend unit is very interesting. Fiora's legend ability basically states, when one of your units becomes mighty, you can exhaust the legend unit to channel one rune exhausted. So really kind of building on to that ramp kind of play style. And just to clarify, when a unit becomes mighty is when it gains 5 or more might. Remember this because the deck of Fiora is very numbers based. I just want to mention that. So let's look at Fiora's new champion unit. Fiora Peerless is one of those really fun ones. When Fiora Peerless defends or attacks one-on-one, and that's very specific, one-on-one, you double the might for Fiora Peerless for that combat. Now, it's very important that you remember this is specifically for combat, not for turn. So while that combat is happening, you double Fiora Peerless's might. She instead is a 6 might unit as opposed to a 3 might unit. Riposte is Fiora's signature spell, and let's look at what Riposte does. At a reaction speed, so you can play this before spells and after abilities resolve. You choose a friendly unit, so in this case you could choose Fiora Peerless. You choose a spell that maybe your opponent has cast on your Fiora Peerless, let's say a Fight or Flight, or maybe we could also do like an Arcane Shift, or those other ones like Spinning Axes is a good one, for example. Riposte counters that spell. Your Fiora Peerless will gain might equal to the spell's energy cost this turn. Really wild. Okay, so there's a couple things to keep in mind here. Riposte gives you might for the turn. Fiora Peerless gives you might for the combat. This is just one example of some really fun interaction with Fiora's new chosen champion. Let's talk about Fiora's second chosen champion that you can choose. So we have the 3 might Fiora Worthy. Fiora Worthy, when a unit you control becomes mighty, you can pay 1 order rune and ready it. To clarify again, the text specifies that a unit in order to become mighty must have 5 or more might. So you can see how both the new body domain and order domain Fiora really work in unison with Riposte, her new signature spell. But also keep in mind, both of those units are 3 might units. Let's talk about some general combos that you can use or play while playing Fiora. So remember her legend ability, you can exhaust her to, once a unit becomes mighty, you can exhaust her once per turn, you channel an extra rune. Riposte basically sucks the might out of a spell and gives it to one of your units. And so the original Fiora from Origins also works really well here too. She's 4 might. When she becomes mighty, she gets deflect, ganking, and she can go ahead and have shield as well. So there's a lot of fun things that you can use to buff your units to get to those higher mights. Pit Rookie is really fun because when you play Pit Rookie, you buff a friendly unit. Boom, you buff your yellow Fiora, and then she becomes a 5 might unit. Then you can trigger your legend ability, and you're not only with a 5 might unit on the board that has deflect, ganking, and shield, but then you also have the ability to channel rune every time you make the unit another unit mighty. Also, BF Sword is a really fun one here. BF Sword, for the 4 runes you're going to use to basically play it, you get a 3 might bump to whatever you equip. So Fiora goes from a 4 might all the way to a 7 might, just like that, reaching that mighty status. I'm going to put a little bit of a spotlight on Unsung Hero in the bottom right too. Unsung Hero does have a really fun death knell ability. If Unsung Hero was mighty, you draw 2 cards. So there's a really fun interaction with BF Sword of sending in your Unsung Hero to get that trigger for draw 2, thus getting you even more card draw. So these are just some small combos. By no means is this guide going to be like hey, this is the only way to play Fiora, but I want to highlight combos that you can kind of homebrew in your own play style when you pick her up. And let's just look at each one of the champion units that Fiora brings to the table here in Spiritforge. We have Fiora Peerless, which is when she attacks or defends one-on-one, you double her might. Fiora Victorious, which when she becomes mighty, she gets deflect, ganking, and shield. Then we have Fiora Worthy. Fiora Worthy is really fun because when you control a unit that becomes mighty, you can pay the order domain and then ready it. So you can ready a unit instantly that turn. And so keep in mind, all of these Fiora champion units are going to be either 3 or 4 might, but that's important because of a version of Fiora, specifically the Baited Hook version. Now, Baited Hook is a fun card. I remember Baited Hook started with an Darius in Origins, and people really couldn't get it to really click very well in the Darius deck. But in Fiora, it functions a little bit differently. So you pay 1 rune, and you recycle an order and tap Baited Hook. Remember, Baited Hook is a gear. With this, you're killing a friendly unit. You can look at the top 5 cards from your main deck and play a unit that has might up to 1 more than the unit that you had just killed. You ignore its cost, recycle the rest of the money, bottom of your deck. So remember, I said numbers were very important in Fiora. That's because a lot of your units in the Fiora deck are either going to be 3 might, 4 might, or 5 might. Specifically, and 6 might if you're playing the Harness Dragon version of Fiora. And so cards like First Mate, you play, enter, you can kill the First Mate after you ready another unit, and then Baited Hook allows you to play a 4 cost like a Set, a Spectral Matron, or you can even play Fiora Victorious, or another highlight in Spirit Forge is Akshan. Being able to steal an opponent's gears can also be a really fun way to make other units on your battlefield mighty. But like any deck in the meta, we're going to need cards that can buff us up during combats. If we're going to be winning battlefields, we need to make sure that we secure those battlefields no matter what the cost. And so Fiora runs some of the 3 really strongest removal and combat tricks in the game. One of the new ones here in Spirit Forged is Punch First. So Punch First is really cool because at an action speed, you give a unit plus 5 might. There's very little that's going to get around 5 might added. And if you're playing the orange Fiora Peerless, remember, she doubles in one-on-one combat. So she's already a 6 with plus 5. She's an 11. And in most cases, you can play this by turn 2 or 3. There's not much that's going to get around that unless they bounce your unit. In which case, no problem. They can have the battlefield because at that early in the game, there's still more things that we can do to catch up. Next, we have Death Grip, another Spirit Forge card that's worth kind of looking at. It's a reaction speed spell. So you kill a friendly unit with Death Grip, and with that killing a friendly unit, you take its might and you give it to another unit this turn, another friendly unit, and you draw off of that. So if you wanted to, at reaction speed, kill your First Mate, or your Pit Rookie, or your Unsung Hero, who's also drawing you a card if it's mighty. So Death Grip really synergizes with Unsung Hero and its Death Knell ability. Remember, when Unsung Hero is mighty and you kill it, you get to draw 2. Combined with Death Grip, we're now drawing 3, and then giving the 5 might that Unsung Hero would have had to another unit on our battlefield at reaction speed. Again, another way to secure those battlefields. And if you've been playing Origins, you've definitely played against Hidden Blade, one of the best removal spells in the game. While its controller draws 2, you can target your own units. So units like Unsung Hero, if they're mighty, you're drawing 4 cards off of that. That's a lot of card draw to draw into your Punch First or your Ripostes. So keep in mind, there's a lot of fun Death Knell abilities, and even though there may not be a lot of Death Knell units, Death Knell is a big part of the Fiora playstyle. Let's pause and just take a minute and look at the battlefields. Let's look at some of the battlefields for Fiora. So the first one is Candlelight Sanctum. Candlelight Sanctum is one of the fun ones because it allows you to look at the top 2 of your main deck when you conquer the battlefield. You look at one or both and you can recycle them and you put them back in any order. So you can draw into the thing that you really need. Next is Trefarian War Camp. That one's really straightforward. Your units get +1, even closer to being mighty, so that your Fiora Victorious, as soon as she conquers that battlefield, is already mighty, getting to the deflect, ganking, and the shield ability. Dreaming Tree is also really fun. The first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell there, you draw each turn. These are just recommended battlefields in the Fiora deck. But remember, they all kind of really play on top of making your units mighty, giving yourself the ability to see stuff in your main deck and to make units mighty on the fly. And so listed below is the Chengdu regional list that came in second. While yes, the Draven did beat the Fiora, let's be honest here, in a meta that is full of Draven, I think if you're looking for a deck that's probably going to be more affordable to make come Spirit Forge release, Fiora is one of those decks that's going to be really fun in a different playstyle completely than Draven. Remember, you want to prioritize your one-on-one combats. You want to go ahead and prioritize the spells that are going to buff your units, kill your units, and with cards like this list running Harness Dragon, it is one of the best removal spells that you can play in the game, or removal units technically, because when you play Harness Dragon, you get to kill an enemy unit. But let me know down below what you think, and if you gained anything in this guide, also share your stories with playing Fiora or any tips and tricks that you might have so that others can learn to play her too. This is JD with Summoners Weekly. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.